Hi, I'm Kerry and welcome to today's SUBU Fake Off video. Today's a festive edition because we're going to be making and decorating some gingerbread men. So here's everything you're going to need. For a little bit of speed today, I've already weighed out those ingredients. It's quite a straightforward dough to put together and fairly quick, but it does need to rest in the fridge for a little while after you've made the dough. So we're going to crack on and make a start now. So the ingredients that I've weighed out, you've got 350 grams of plain flour in this bowl. That's also with 1 teaspoon of bicarbonate of soda. And then in terms of the spices and the kind of flavour, we've got 2 teaspoons of ground ginger, 1 teaspoon of cinnamon, and I've also popped in there a 1/4 teaspoon of some mixed spice because I like quite a kind of spiced biscuit, but you can leave that one out if you want to. And then we've also got 125 grams of butter, and this is 175 grams of light brown soft sugar. And then in this one here, this is 1 egg mixed with 4 teaspoons of golden syrup. Fantastic, so we can make a start. So what we're going to do is start like you would kind of most other sort of dough recipes. We're going to cream together the butter and the sugar. So I'm just going to pop the butter in the mixer. It's nice and soft already, which is good, but just means it's a little bit more challenging to get out of the bowl. So we'll just give that a good scrape. Fantastic. And then to that, we're going to add our sugar. So just pop that all in, and then we're just going to beat this all together until it's kind of not so grainy. Okay, so once you've given that a couple of minutes to come together, we can add in the egg and the syrup mixture. But what I'm going to take the opportunity to do is just scrape the mixture off of the sides. You really just kind of want to make sure that you're getting everything incorporated. So give that a good scrape. Okay, so what we're going to do then is add our egg and, as I said, the syrup mixture. So I'm just going to pour that in, and obviously because it's golden syrup, it's quite sticky, so you have to kind of work to get that out as well. But once that's all out, what I'm just going to do is add just a little bit of our flour mixture as well, and that just kind of helps stops the mixture kind of going a bit too lumpy once you've added the egg. So we've done that. Now I'm going to give that another sort of 30 seconds or so to come together. Okay, fantastic. So as you can see, that's come together, but it's quite a kind of sloppy mixture and definitely nowhere near a dough yet. So what we're going to do is then add our flour, and that's what's going to make it obviously more of a sort of solid dough that we can work with. So we're going to do this in 2 halves. So just mix the flour together with all of those spices. And then, oh, it smells really nice and very Christmassy. I'm just going to add about half, don't have to be exact, of the flour into our mixer. And then again, we're just going to let that incorporate. So I might have been a bit too eager and put in a bit too much flour, so I look like I'm covered in snow, so I suppose that's festive. But what we're going to do is then just add the rest of the flour and then bring that together to form a nice dough. So get as much off the spoon as you can. And then again, one last mix, and that should bring together our dough. I'm going to step away this time. Now have our dough mix, and we just want to bring that together. You don't need to kind of knead it as such, but as I said, just sort of bring it together so that it forms nice ball that we can then put in the fridge. So the recipe I've used and the method that I've used obviously mixes and creams the butter and sugar together, but there's a few different ways that you could do it. I know a lot of recipes melt the butter and the sugar together on the hob, and then you just kind of stir through the flour. Obviously use kind of whatever method you want. I've just stuck to this one because this is a normal way that you would make kind of some other biscuits. Okay, so I'm just going to grab some flour. So we're just going to sprinkle this onto the worktop, and as I said, that's just going to help us bring our dough mix together. So you can see there, looks like a dough, but just kind of quite crumbly. So we're going to grab our spoon again, a bit more flour, and bring all of those kind of crumbs out and mix it together. Obviously, because it's a dough, you have to work quite hard to get up the size of the bowl. There we go. That's most of it. So, as I said, you don't need to worry so much about kind of kneading this. You just want to bring it together so that it can have some time in the fridge, and then it's going to be easy for us to roll when it comes out. And you can see that it's obviously got a nice kind of gingerbready brown colour. So I'm just going to bring that together. And I'm going to grab some cling film. So what I like to do is actually split this dough into two. You don't need to do this again, but it just makes it that much easier to kind of roll and work with. And again, you obviously don't have to be precise at all. But we're just going to shape that into a sort of circle and pop it in our cling film. And you could just roll this into a ball, but again, what I quite like to do is just to kind of give it a head start with rolling, give it a squidge down so it's nice and flat. So that's one of our dough patties. Grab some more cling film. And as I said, don't need to be precise with this at all. You just want sort of two evenish size balls. Scrape the rest of that off the bench. Okay, fantastic. So there we go. So hopefully you can see quite a nice flat shape. So what we're going to do now is pop these in the fridge, and they need to chill. So the reason for that is that you want the butter in it to kind of harden, so that when you're rolling it, it's a bit easier to work with, and when they go in the oven, they kind of keep their shape. So I'm going to put this in for about half an hour, but you could kind of do any amount of time that you want to, really. If you wanted to keep it in overnight, if you're busy doing something for the rest of the day and want to come back to it tomorrow, that's absolutely fine as well. You'd obviously just need to give it a little bit more time out of the fridge, just to kind of soften a little bit. But as I said, I'm going to go with half an hour, so I'm going to pop that in the fridge now. Okay, so that's been 30 minutes, so I've just taken the dough out of the fridge, and a few minutes ago, whilst I was waiting for the dough, I've also preheated the oven. So I've preheated that to 180 degrees, or that's 160 if you've got a fan oven, or gas mark 4. Okay, so what we need to do now is obviously roll this out. So we're just going to flour the worktop, and obviously this is just to make sure that the dough doesn't stick. And as I said before, you can keep the dough in the fridge for much longer if you wanted to, but this we can already feel has just kind of gone slightly firm, so that should be fine for us to roll. Okay, and because, as I said, I like to kind of squash that down so it kind of goes into the fridge flat, you kind of get a head start on the rolling. But as I said, we're going to place that down. Got a rolling pin here, and we're just going to flour that and flour the top of the dough. So then we're just going to start to roll out, and as I said, because that's been in the fridge, it's a little bit firmer, so you've got to work a bit harder, but actually it's good in terms of making the cookies. So what I'm doing is just every few rolls with the rolling pin, I'm just turning the dough, and that's sort of to make sure that it's not sticking to the worktop, but also just to make it a kind of an even roll. So where we want to eventually get to with the dough is for it to be about 1/2 centimetre thick, so about 5 mils. And that should be a good thickness for our gingerbread people. I said at the top of this that we were making gingerbread men, but actually we're making gingerbread people. Okay, so I'm going to keep turning that and just carry on rolling. And you will see that it's kind of cracking at the sides. I'm not sure if you can see that there, but that's not a problem at all. All we need to really focus on is having some good space in the middle of it to make sure that we've got plenty of shape to cut out our people. And then any that's left over, we'll just kind of squish it back together again. So I think we're probably getting nearly there. I'm just going to carry on rolling until, as I said, we get a nice kind of even, flat, consistent level. So give it a little bit more. If your cookies are on the thick side, that's not a problem. They might just take kind of a minute or two longer in the oven. And some of it kind of comes down to personal preference anyway. So I think that's probably about right. I can see it's a touch thicker on that side. You can kind of, some people just do it by feel, but I do like, if you can, to try and get down to the level of the dough to sort of see how thick it is. Okay, so I think we're there. So obviously, because we're making gingerbread people, I've got some gingerbread cutters. So I've got 2 similar size there, and then a sort of little mini baby one. But obviously, with this dough, you can cut it out to whatever shape you wanted it. If you've got some snowflakes or some Christmas trees knocking around, then you can obviously do them in that shape. If you don't have any cookie cutters, but you've got a tin can from something, I have seen some people use that as well, just to make some rounds. So it's really anything you've kind of got access to, really. Okay, so what I'm going to do is now just press lightly, or place lightly the cutter on top of the dough. But until I've got it, I know I've got it exactly where I want it, I'm not going to press down too hard. Obviously, to try and maximise as many shapes as possible, you want to be kind of quite sensible with where you place them. So I'm going to go right for the edge, and then I'm just going to press down hard, and obviously you can feel then when it meets the bench. And then I'm just going to lift that up, and sometimes, like it has here, the cookie will kind of come out with the cutter, but sometimes it will stay down and you just kind of have to lift it up with a knife. So what I've got here is a baking tray that I've already lined with some baking parchment or some non-stick paper. So what we're then just going to do is just place the cookies very gently on top of there. Fantastic, I don't know if you can see that. So we've just got 1 gingerbread man on our baking tray. So now what we're going to do is just carry on cutting and cut a few more. So I'm going to go for another man above that one. So as I said, just press down quite lightly initially, but then a bit firmer when you're happy with the position, and then just pop them on the tray. Unlike kind of chocolate chip cookies or things like this, these aren't going to spread lots, but I always think it's best just to keep a bit of space on the tray. So I'm going to go for this shape now. So as you said, just pop it down and press, and then again that one's come up with the cookie cutter, so then you're just going to press it ever so lightly, and it should just sort of fall out of the cutter. I'll do another one of those. There we go. So again, just pressing it ever so lightly out and placing it on the tray. And then I'm going to do a couple of these mini ones just because I think they're cute. But obviously what you may need to be aware of, because these are smaller biscuits, they may cook a bit quicker. So if you wanted to, you might do a kind of completely separate batch of just the smaller ones or different sized ones. But I'm going to risk it and just pop them all on the same tray. And the good thing about these mini ones is you'll be able to get lots and lots and lots out of one sheet of dough. So I'm going to go for, I think, 4 of these little ones. So again, as long as you made sure that your work surface was nice and floured, these shouldn't stick and should come up really quite easily. So, as you can see, we've got a full tray of our shapes there. So as I said, they're now going to go into the oven that I preheated whilst the dough was in the fridge. So that was 180, or that's 160 if you've got a fan, or gas mark 4, and they're going to go in for somewhere between 12 and 15 minutes. I would always say at the kind of 12-minute mark, have a check. If they look like they're firm and they've got a nice colour on them, you might want to think about taking them out. But if you're still not sure, another couple of minutes will absolutely be fine. So I'm going to pop those in the oven now. So our gingerbread people are cooked now. I took mine out of the oven after 13 minutes. So I checked them after 12 and just gave them that minute extra longer. And here they are. So I took them out a little while ago so they've had a chance to cool down. I think I was a little overzealous and tried to fit a bit too many on the tray, so a couple of them did stick together, but it's not too much of a problem. If you just, once they're out of the oven, cooling but still quite warm, if you just take something with a thin edge, so a little knife or something, and just kind of separate them apart, because the dough's still kind of quite soft, it's really easy to do, so don't worry too much about it. Okay, so now that we've got them cooked, we obviously need to get them to the decorating. So I'm just going to use a really simple icing sugar glazing icing recipe. Traditionally I think people use kind of royal icing, so that's when you use egg whites with icing sugar, but I'm just going to use icing sugar and water. So what I've got here is 125 grams of icing sugar, and this is 15 ml, so not very much at all, of warm water. So what we need to do is just mix those two together. So I'm just going to go kind of fairly slowly with the water, because you actually don't need very much to kind of get the consistency that you want. And it's always obviously better to add more. So just mix this together. It may take a little while to get the consistency that you're after, but just whisk it to try and incorporate all of the sugar. So I think I'm actually going to be using all of that 15 ml. Possibly might even need a little bit more. So it can be a little challenging to get the consistency of the icing that you want, because if you make it too runny, too thin, it's just not going to hold its shape and it'll sort of go all over the kind of cookies and the gingerbread men. But equally, you need it to be thin enough that you can actually kind of pipe it, and as you can see, I don't think I'd get that out of the piping bag. So what I'm going to do is just get a little bit extra water. And the recipe that I looked at said use warm water, and I think that's just to help it come together a little bit easier. But to be honest, I have done it with cold water in the past. And you can also do this with lemon juice as well instead of water. So you can hear that's thinning up a little bit now, but it's still really quite thick. So you're literally just adding it almost a couple of drops at a time, because as I said, that consistency can be quite challenging to get exactly right. So I can nearly get the whisk through it, which is the first challenge. So just a couple of drops more, as I said. And you also could add some flavouring to this as well if you wanted to. You can add some vanilla extract, but that obviously might colour the icing somewhat, so it won't stay kind of white. You could add some peppermint extract, whatever you fancy really, and again just a couple more drops. It's definitely starting to get there now. And the consistency we're looking for is that it kind of would coat and not fall off the back of a spoon. But obviously at the moment, I don't think you would even get a spoon through it. Okay, so I think we are actually there. Let's just take my, it was so firm at first. My whisk's fallen apart. Let's just get rid of that. Grab a tissue. Okay, so yeah, I think we're happy with this consistency now. So if you can see this, it's still quite firm, so you have to kind of work a little to get the spoon through it. But if you imagine that kind of coming through a piping bag, it's keeping its shape, but I don't think that's going to spread too much. As I said, this is trial and error. The recipe that I used said 125 grams of icing sugar and 15 ml of water, but obviously I used a bit more water than that. So it is just kind of, you know, almost judging it by eye. If you do go too far and add a bit too much water, obviously not a problem, just going to add a bit more icing sugar, and you just want to try and get the consistency like that. So now that we've made the icing, what we're going to do is pop that into a piping bag. So you've got a couple of different options here. You could use like a proper piping bag with a piping bag nozzle, or you can use these disposable piping bags, so they're just plastic ones that you throw away after. Obviously not necessarily fantastic for the environment, but if you are making something that's quite kind of sticky and would be hard to wash up, you know, they do have a place. But what I'm actually going to use is just a sandwich bag. So I've just popped this inside a glass so it's easier to get the icing into it, but it's just a normal sandwich bag, and we're just going to cut a very little bit off of the tip. So we're going to take our icing, give it one final mix, and pour that into our sandwich bag / piping bag. And because we're decorating these gingerbread people and they don't kind of traditionally have a huge amount of icing on them, you really don't need very much icing at all. So you can get a little bit more out. Okay, and there we go. So what we will have, if we take that out of the bag, is some icing. So we're just going to twist that round to make sure that it's really nice and firm at the bottom, and we're keeping all of the icing in the bottom of the bag and it's not kind of splurging at the top. So what we obviously need now is some of our gingerbread people. So if we do them one at a time, I'm going to take one of our gingerbread men and I will cut just a tiny little bit off the nozzle or off the tip of the sandwich bag. So if you just kind of hold it upside down, it's not going to come out because we twisted it, but if you hold it upside down and kind of just squeeze the end to try and get rid of any of the icing that's in there, and as I said, we're just going to take the tiniest little bit off because it's easier to obviously cut more than it would be to do anything else. So what I tend to do is just give it a bit of a trial. So I'm just going to pipe it straight on to the work surface. So I think actually that's probably exactly the right sort of thickness that we want. I just do it on the back of the cookie so you can see that. So we've got a line about that thin. But again, a lot of this is just sort of down to personal taste and personal preference. I'm just going to wipe that off the bag so it doesn't stick. Okay, and then obviously now you can be as kind of creative as you want to, really. In terms of other decorations, I've got some jelly tops, or you can use kind of any sugary sweets. I kind of like the look of these. I think they look kind of quite traditional. You could use Smarties, you could not use anything like that and just use the icing. So those are the ones that I'm going to be using. But as I said, it's pretty much up to you to be as creative as you want to. If you didn't want to decorate them at all, obviously you could just eat them like that, but I think this is quite fun. And you could write Christmas messages onto them if you wanted to. If you are kind of struggling with Christmas present ideas, I think these can be really nice to give to people. So you could kind of do a few and package them up in a nice little bag. But what I'm going to go for initially is just quite a traditional design. So I'm just going to do 2 eyes and a little smiley mouth. And then some squiggles on the arms and legs. So you just want to be a little bit patient with it, because we obviously cut quite a thin hole out of the bag. It can take a little while for the icing to come through, and obviously the consistency that we went for was kind of a little bit thicker as well. So anytime you kind of got a bit of excess coming out of the icing bag, out of the piping bag, it's obviously not a problem. You just wipe the end and go back. So as I said, I'm just doing that kind of traditional squiggly line that you see on a lot of gingerbread people. And also, if you wanted to, you could obviously colour this icing as well. So I have gone for white, but if you wanted to add a bit of food colouring, You can kind of go as crazy as you like, really. Fantastic, so I'm then going to just finish off my little gingerbread man with some jelly buttons. So all you're going to do is take one of the sweets, just pop some of the icing on the back. That's going to act like glue, and then just pop those on his tummy. What colour should I go for? I'm going to go for green. So just take another one of the sweets. As we said, just pop some of that icing on the back. That's going to act like your glue. And pop it on. And there we have our first gingerbread man. So I'm going to go for another one now. I'll go for one of the smaller ones that we did. And as I said before, you know, this dough is kind of really useful in that you could just make any designs that you wanted to out of it. If you didn't have gingerbread cutters but had some other shapes, you can absolutely use them. So what I'm doing with this one is just going all the way round and filling that line in, a couple of eyes, smiley mouth, and I'm not going to put a button on this guy because he's quite small. And there we go. Person number 2. And then let's grab one of our people in a dress. I'm going to do one of these. And I'll do a similar design to the first one. So I'm going to do, oh, got a little bit coming out. So as I said, you just want to clean the end of it with the tissue. And at any point, you just want to make sure that your twist in your piping bag is nice and tight again, so it's not kind of coming out through the top. And I'm just going to do another one of those squiggly lines at the bottom of the dress. Clean off the nozzle again, and I'll do another squiggly line above that one. Do some little cuffs. And obviously we want a nice, happy face. Couple of eyes. Big cheesy grin, and I'm going to pop a couple of more buttons on this one as well. So as you can see, this really doesn't use very much of the icing, so it will go quite a long way. Fantastic. So there's our third one. So there we have it. There's our gingerbread people. As you saw, nice simple recipe, doesn't take too long, and a really nice thing to do ahead of Christmas to get yourself into the festive mood. The dough that I used and the recipe that I used makes quite a lot of cookies, so the tray that you saw there was actually half of the dough. I've still got the other half left in the fridge, so it's quite a big yield. So if you did want to give them out to people, you probably have quite a lot. So thank you very much for watching, and I hope you enjoy your festive season. Thank you.